My name is Ellen Davis. I'm 28 years old. I'm working as a programmer who once believed that family love could be earned through sacrifice. For most of my life, I trained myself to carry the weight others shrugged off, convinced that effort was the currency of belonging. In our small Denver house, I was the quiet shadow to my sister Sharon's chandelier light, the kid who stayed up late at the kitchen table mapping out algebra proofs while the washing machine thumped and the television murmured from the next room. When Dad lost his warehouse job and the house air turned thin with worry, I mowed lawns, bagged groceries, and learned what it felt like to hand over my own cash for the family's bread and milk. It was the first draft of a contract I never signed but kept obeying. Be useful, and you might be loved. The contract grew teeth when I left for the University of Colorado. Tuition, part-time shifts, freelance coding, and a second job waiting tables stitched together a life where sleep came like a stolen luxury. Every month I wired something home. $200 here, $300 there, a $500 check that wiped out my savings but paid down a hospital bill. I told myself the ache tasted noble. I pictured invisible points tallying in some cosmic ledger that would, one day, mark me down as a daughter who mattered. After graduation, the numbers got bigger and the requests got bolder. A junior developer's salary ballooned into family expectations, mortgage shortfalls, utilities past due, car repairs that could not wait, heart meds that never got cheaper. Sharon's missed rent leaned on my direct deposits like a familiar elbow. My life shrank to a one-bedroom with secondhand furniture and a revolving door of sacrifices I named duty. I became fluent in late-night troubleshooting calls and early morning bank transfers. Gratitude thinned to a nod, then a silence, but I defended that silence as a symptom of stress, not a verdict. When their 35th anniversary approached, I imagined a reset. I sketched a night that could mend the frayed seams, a private corner at a warm Italian restaurant in Denver, string lights and fresh flowers, a small banner promising 35 years strong. I argued with myself over menu choices so long it felt like I was defusing a bomb. I paid deposits I would feel for months. I built the centerpiece with the same precision I used for product launches, 2 weeks in Italy, flights and hotels already booked, tours lined up like pearls on a thread, a gondola ride, and a cooking class because Mom used to hum over simmering tomatoes. $15,000 pulled straight from the marrow of my savings, and still it felt like a bargain if it could buy a simple thing, belonging. The signs, of course, had been blinking for years. Mom's thank yous had become punctuation marks, not sentences. Dad called when something was broken, not when a day was good. Sharon's texts moved in one direction, small emergencies dressed as inevitabilities. But I had trained myself not to read warning labels. I carried on, certain the right gesture could pry open a door that had remained shut since childhood. The night arrived. The restaurant glowed, silverware lined up like trimmed hedges, the corner I paid extra for shimmering under soft lights. I wore a burgundy dress I had talked myself into buying after a long debate with the price tag and with my own permission to feel beautiful. Conversation slid like a knife that wasn't sharp enough to cut, but still scraped. A joke about my tech money, a snort about being too good for ordinary hours, the old comparison to Sharon dressed up as banter. I smiled until the muscles felt like wire. When I presented the gift, I did it the way I used to deliver demos, steady hands, clear voice, heart knocking like a visitor at a locked door. The envelope traveled across the table toward the people I had been financing for years, toward a verdict I was still naive enough to expect would be gentle. What came back was a laugh, clean and cold, and a sentence that landed like the heel of a boot: "You are not part of this family." It arrived with a smirk nearby and silence at my side. In the space after those words, my entire ledger burst into flame. The rent I covered, the bills I balanced, the rides to the doctor, the weekends I surrendered. Something inside me steadied instead of shattering. The edges of the room sharpened into crisp outlines, candles, plates, the pattern on the tablecloth I had selected from an emailed catalog, the faint smudge of sauce on Dad's napkin. I felt my spine lengthen around a sentence that had been growing in the dark for years. I told them to stop asking me for money. I signaled the waiter to split the bill. I placed my card down with a hand that had wired so much of my life away and finally decided to keep what was left. I walked out to the Denver night with my heartbeat unspooling into the cool air. The city sounded different, like a radio tuned one click closer to clarity. I drove home past streetlights I'd missed 100 times, their halos suddenly not invitations to return, but beacons marking a road that was, and had always been, mine. In the quiet of my apartment, the old couch welcomed me like a witness. I sat with a heaviness and felt, beneath it, a thin and stubborn seam of relief. The contract I never signed had been torn in public. The penalty clauses, guilt, obligation, the reflex to apologize were still there, but so was something new, the first draft of my terms. The next morning, I practiced a different kind of maintenance. I canceled transfers, closed out recurring payments that had drained my account each 15th. Like a tide I had mistaken for gravity. I blocked the numbers that treated me like a service, not a person. I made coffee and stood by the window while the sun climbed over the mountains I rarely let myself look at. Freedom didn't rush in like a parade, it crept in like light under a door, a thin line widening. Rhonda, friend and coworker, slid into the booth across from me the following week and became the mirror I'd avoided. She called the pattern by its real name and didn't flinch. She said I had been their instrument, not their daughter, and the music I played was always the same note, yes. Her words stung because they disinfected. I went back to the office and poured that clean ache into code, into crisp pull requests and thoughtful reviews, into late evenings that belonged to curiosity instead of crisis. My manager noticed. Praise for a feature felt like a language I'd forgotten I spoke. A bonus arrived not as a miracle, but as a receipt that simply read, "Value delivered." At home, I made small repairs to my life. I replaced the couch. I hung a bright print over the desk where I'd planned trips for other people. I joined a weekend hiking group and learned the rhythm of my lungs on switchbacks, the solid arithmetic of feet and breath and sky. I signed up for a yoga class that taught me how to exhale even when memory tried to tighten my chest. Guilt still knocked, but I learned not to set a place for it. The backlash came like weather. Sharon needed a bridge, $2,000, then more. Mom tried a softer tone and then a sharper one. Dad pivoted to accusation, pointing at my refusal like a collapsed scaffold and calling it the cause. I let the calls dissolve into the distance where all storms eventually go. I did not become stone. I simply became a person with a boundary, a line that did not move when pushed. I reminded myself, again and again, that love without respect is not love but leverage. Consequences rippled outward the way they always had, only this time not toward me. Without my transfers, Sharon's rent ledger caught up to her. Without my monthly life support, my parents' bills added their own gnawing. They sold the house where I had learned the calculus of silence and replaced it with a smaller life. News of it reached me through cousins and the grapevine that blooms best in crisis. I did not celebrate their losses. I simply did not volunteer to carry them. Work grew into a place where I could belong on the strength of what I made instead of what I gave away. I led a project and learned how to hold a room without apologizing for the space I took. I mentored a junior dev and watched her eyes light up when a thorny bug unraveled. I collected small good things, a new coffee mug, a sunny corner for houseplants, a stack of novels rescued from a thrift store, a list of trails I wanted to try before the first snowfall. I saved for a trip, Japan maybe, an itinerary that would be mine from first step to last. I also stepped into rooms where I could be useful on new terms. A local coding boot camp welcomed me on Saturday mornings, and I found myself cheering quietly when a student printed her first hello, whirled to the screen with pride that rang through the room. Those mornings rewired something. Helping did not have to cost me myself. The family orbit remained noisy at a distance. A letter arrived once, dense with blame. I let it say what it needed to say, and then I let it go. A voicemail accused me of forgetting where I came from. I knew exactly where I came from. I was busy choosing where I would go. The old script tried to rerun on new days, but I had changed the channel. A year later, my apartment felt like proof. The rug under my feet was soft because I chose softness. The bookshelf was full because I chose time. The view of the mountains was the same one Denver had always offered, but now I looked, and in looking, I allowed myself to want. Promotion arrived with its steady handshake. My paycheck grew, and for the first time, so did the line item labeled Future. There were lonely nights. Freedom is not a crowd, it is a door. Some evenings I stood at that door and felt the draft of what I had lost, the idea of family, the hope that effort would be enough, the child's wish to be called in from the dark. I grieved that wish honestly. Then I turned on a lamp I had purchased for its warm, kind light, and I sat in a room I had built, and I remembered that love is not a prize awarded for endurance. It is a practice, and I could practice it with people who offered it back. The lesson settled slow and steady. Boundaries are not a wall against love, they are the conditions that make love possible. Respect is not an optional garnish on a family recipe. It is the salt that brings everything else to life. Blood does not make loyalty inevitable. Choice does. I stopped auditioning for a role written for someone else. I started living the part I'd always been capable of playing, a woman who knows her worth and refuses to spend it where it buys only contempt. On weekends, I chase light with a camera, gold pooling over foothills, the city turning its face toward evening. Sometimes I cook the kind of meal that fills the apartment with basil and garlic and laughter from friends who bring dessert and questions about my week. Sometimes I do nothing, which is its own kind of doing when you have been busy proving for years. I still send help into the world, just not as tribute. I give to causes that matter, to students who remind me of me, to the future I am tenderly drafting. I am not hardened, I am clear. If I ever sit across from those three again, I will not arrive with gifts meant to purchase dignity. I will bring nothing but myself, and the simple sentence I learned to say, on a burgundy-dressed night beneath string lights, I am done paying to be allowed in. I will listen without leaning forward to catch a request. I will leave when respect leaves the table. This is the life after the door. It is quieter than I imagined and richer than I hoped. It is built, not begged for, and if someone out there is still spending themselves into a love that never arrives, I can only say this as proof, not persuasion. You can keep your money, your time, your careful heart. You can walk away and still be whole. You can choose yourself and find, to your astonishment, that the world does not close, it opens.